say, um, is the conception of breathing. I mean, the great thing about breathing is that we don't have to be fully in charge of it, right? It's one of those processes that's both voluntary and involuntary. And breathing is actually also become kind of a default mode in a lot of yoga practices, in a lot of different methods of yoga. So it's like, well, if you just take a good breath, everything gets better in your life, which is, there's some truth to that, right? But um, the subtlety of breathing, the potential of breathing, what breathing is. So one of the lines, as you know, I've shared with you many times, it's the interpretation of BKS Iyengar of the Yoga Sutras. It's his translation of a key passage. When effortful effort becomes effortless, you've encountered the fourth method of pranayama, right? So let me try to say that again. What does that even mean? So now I want to juxtapose that against the backdrop of let me think. When effortful effort becomes effortless, you've encountered the fourth method of breathing, right? And that one of the things that I heard BKS Iyengar say one time on a video, I didn't ever see him in person, was that your whole body breathes. Okay, so like even your skin breathes. So he's saying these things that I think are metaphorical and literal, right? And then so I've always wondered about that. What would it mean to have the sense of, again, this is how it gets back to what your conception of body is and what your conception of breathing is. It's like when I first started to think about, when I first started yoga practice, I would think, well, my breathing just means my inhalation and my exhalation. I know how to breathe. Here's the inhalation, here's the exhalation. And then I started to realize at one point, as you know, your breathing has four parts. Your breathing cycle has four parts. There's the inhalation, the exhalation. That's the one that's most tangible, right? Physically tangible. But there's also the retention at the very top of inhalation, and there's a retention on the very bottom of exhalation. That your breathing is actually four parts, not two, two of which are more able to be perceived because of movement and action and physical movement. But the retentive parts of breath are also really important. So your breathing has four parts. So you're never not breathing, even when you're holding your breath. Now, that thought blew my mind. Okay, like basic, like what's going on in my breathing cycle? And I believe that's part of why breath is so magical, is it touches both the ceasing and the movement, right? That your breath cycle, that's why it's so powerful, is it has its foot in both worlds, and we don't even have to be aware of it, right? That it's both, that it's touching all aspects of the existential metaphysic, right? So put a pin in, like, that's just, I could go there all day, but I don't want to right now, right? So let's just take a couple of breaths here for a second. So just for a second, be more aware. Remember, we're circling back to when effortless effort becomes effortless, right? And that somehow there's a potential of having your whole organism be breathing, right? Now that's actually happening through the blood too. There's a physical story here, right? Because when I'm breathing and getting oxygen in through my lungs, my blood is actually oxygenating, and the capillary system is delivering oxygen all the way through the butt, all the way through the system, right? So that's actually happening through your vascular system too. But maybe there's something else. So try to feel for a second, right? Without doing it through your breath first. Try to feel where your skin is touching the air, or you can feel the air on your skin, and maybe where your clothes are touching your body. Try to be more aware of your skin, right? Now notice some weird, simple things that seem obvious. Notice that if you try to feel your skin, even the skin on your scalp, by the way, the skin on the inside of your mouth, all those things, that like feeling your skin is going to get much more difficult. Like, remember, I always learned by making mistakes. Try clenching your jaw and squeezing and feeling your skin. It's going to be way harder, right? When you're using too much will, skin awareness is going to get more difficult. All right, so I'm going to sit here for a second and try to feel. Does anyone feel? Put your thumb up if when I try to like feel my skin, like I'm sitting here and I almost have to do a version of Shavasana a little bit, get like more inward. But the feeling of my skin, does it feel lighter to you than when you're not feeling it? Do you know what I'm trying to say there? Right? So give me some feedback a little bit. So now check it out. The BKS Iyengar says this other weird thing. All intelligence enters the poses through the skin. Okay, so whatever he's calling intelligence, my mind has to go inward towards my midline in order for me to feel the touch of the air on my skin. And BKS Iyengar is implying that sometimes that has something to do with intelligence, not the kind of intelligence that solves math problems, but the kind of intelligence that's actually here, embodied. Okay. All right. So when I start to feel that, can anyone try to take that feeling of your skin and try to feel the space between, I was talking about this last time I was teaching, the space between like on your face, between your cheekbones and your skin, between your forehead and your skin, right? So all of a sudden you're trying to let there be space in a place that you rarely try to make space. Right? So I'm doing that. So basically, I'm trying to feel the skin on my face. By the way, the muscles on your face and the skin on your face, that's why they get wrinkled, is they get super used, right? That they're constantly in, this is how we communicate with the skin on our face, right? Think about how much work your face does in social interaction. So now you're trying to bring relaxation there. That's why in Shavasana, you hear like, feel the skin on your face. So now you're trying to make that space. You're trying to feel the skin, the air touching your skin everywhere. Now notice, doesn't that, when you start to feel this like this, it'd be very unproductive to clench your teeth, right? To clench your jaw. You'd want to soften your jaw in order to like, and lips together, teeth slightly apart. You'd start to be, in order to feel the skin more, and the lightness that comes from skin, you would start trying to feel the things that you're actually feeling in Shavasana to start Shavasana. That's why a pranayama practice often starts with Shavasana, right? Is because you start to feel more. A different kind of intelligence is required to do pranayama well. I know this is a hard class. Stay with it, right? So this quieting down. So you see how when you're centering in class, you're not just centering to quiet down your mind. So I keep saying when you center, you're opening a door. right? You're actually centering and quieting not just your mind and your thoughts. That's the one that takes up so much space in your life. You're actually trying to quiet and center your body so the sensations of your body are centered. So more starts coming in on the radar, on the screen, right? So your brain gets more passive. So it passes on more information to your mind that can only receive it if it's not judging. There's a crazy circle, right? In order to actually be here, my mind has to quiet, my body has to quiet, so the flood of information that's coming from my senses makes it to my mind, but more unjudged. Against this backdrop, just notice the feeling of your inhalation. Against this backdrop, let that slight pause at the top of the inhalation be graceful, and then let the air out. From this sense of wholeness at the bottom of the inhalation, just notice it. And then don't start again because your mind tells you to start again. Just start again because it's natural to follow an exhalation with an inhalation. It's natural to come up against the ceasing at the top of inhalation. What happens is when the mind starts to try to control too much, at the top and the bottom, things get choppy. When it comes to your breath, your mind's participation is what's unnatural. Except it'll require your mind to realize the full potential of breath. Paradox. Good. And then come back to a little bit more normal perception. One of the things that I remember, so when I was really starting to practice more and more pranayama more deeply, my son was young, right? And so like he's 24 now. So he was, well, I was always practicing pranayama, but I wasn't doing it as focused. And so I'd be doing a pranayama practice and it wasn't just my son, but like um um noises in the house would become very, very penetrating into my being, right? So like if a dish was dropped into the sink, even though I was across the house, that noise would come right into my being really fast, right? It would get me at my core. Like, so when I was in a state of more focus, the the my nervous system was more vulnerable, right? because you end up getting more connected to everything as you approach the ceasing. All right. As you make it part of your breath cycle. So my point in saying this is that when you get really quiet, a super loud noise, like the definition of violence changes as you get more and more deeply close to Shavasana. Violence becomes more invasive quicker. Now, this is part of what, so Michael, I'd be curious if I think some of this, I think Michael's nervous system with CP is exposed the way my nervous system is exposed more from pranayama, right? That like there's, so I like that Renee is moving because my words are getting long, right? All right. So again, we're in more of a pranayama class. So movement's okay though. So let's rock back and forth a little bit because there are different kinds of breath. So I've been trying to show you that there's a lighter, thus far in this, there's a lighter, quieter, subtle, connected aspect of your consciousness that gets mixed into your pranayama practice, right? But they're all different kinds of breath, right? And one of the things that was a revelation for me in poses, because remember, when effortful effort becomes effortless, you've encountered another method of pranayama, right? Is that I remember thinking that again, in my narrow preconception of what breathing is, at first I thought it was inhalation and exhalation, right? Like that was all breathing was, right? And then I realized that I remember when I first came across the idea that you have different breaths for different poses, that you weren't always trying to get your breath to have a resemblance. I mean, it's got some resemblance always because it's breathing, but you weren't always trying to get the same breath regardless of the difficulty of the pose, right? Because if you do that, if you try to breathe deeply in a twist, for example, you're going to do violence, right? So now I'm going back and forth. And so one of the things about pranayama, right, or about breathing, recognizing that there are all different kinds of breath that are relevant, right, are relevant to different poses. It is the case that most of the time you want your chest open when you're trying to breathe. You don't want it collapsed, right? So in laying down pranayama, you typically have your chest lifted, like laying flat for shavasana. Shavasana is not a good time to do pranayama, right? It's not horrible, but it's not great. You shouldn't try to take deep breaths when you're lying flat, right? You typically have your chest open. So go back over your chair a little bit and open your chest and take some support. Um, Dang it, I'm getting called by a doctor right now. I need to pop off just for a second to take a few more breaths. Okay. I'm back. I'm back. False alarm. So okay, um so notice what happens when your chest is more open and how that changes the quality of your breath, right? But there's also, now everyone lean forward. put your hands on your thighs. There's going to be a different kind of breath that comes in upward facing dog, right? So there's also an advantage, right, to a more grounded breath, right? So my forearms are on my thighs, right? And I'm leaning forward. And if I collapse like I'm like defeated, that's not going to be a very good breath. As soon as I go into my defeated inward posture, my breath only hurts certain places, and my inhalation only touches the repetitive places in my body, right? So I know that if I want to get a good breath here, I'm going to have to lift my chest and elongate my spine some. Which means, so like I would never tell you to do pranayama back over in a back bend either, right? Because here you don't have enough earth, right? You have the lifted chest, right? But you don't have enough earth, right? So, right? So go back over like this and realize that there's an advantage here. There's an effortlessness here, right? But there's an ungrounded part of it, right? So come forward again. Can you balance? So the reason why you lift your chest here is to get a little bit of the effortlessness, right? But you also have the grounding. So this is going to be a different breath, even than just sitting like this. So I'm sitting in neutral, taking a couple of breaths. I know this seems really complicated, and it is, right? It's like you have a treasure trove of different types of breath. So if I'm in a get really small for a second. Now, if you get really like I'm collapsing my chest, I'm hunkering down like I'm, trying to hide. Now notice here that a deep breath in this position would be violent, right? If I were to really try to force my breath. And the good thing is that your brain would naturally um not try to take a really deep breath here in a small position. You take shallower breathing, right? Now from this position, so notice how your breath is constrained more here. Now start to elongate your spine and lift your chest. Now notice how more free your breath is. Can you feel that difference, right? When effortful effort becomes effortless. So notice with the slightly more grounded elongation in your body, the breath has the feeling of including more of your body, not because you're pushing your breath into your body, but your body's setting the conditions for quality breathing. I want to pause here for a second and see if you're with me. Do you hear what I'm saying right now? And if not, someone asked me a question. I'm trying to get across the idea that the position of your body transforms the quality of your breathing, right? And so I know that I had a conception of breathing when I was more uninitiated, that somehow if I just increase the inhalation and increase the exhalation of my breathing and pushed it through my body, that's what quality breathing was. And there is a way of doing it that way. A lot of vinyasa yoga does that, right? But that's not going to be great for you and me, right? So the difference between how do you create a sense of fullness in your body without too much effort, right? So it's not so much just about your control over the inhalation and exhalation, but it's about positioning your body in a way that maximizes your breath. So a lot of words, let's do it again. Let's get really small, crunched, right? And know that if someone were suffocating me, I could force a good breath here and I would, right? But in this position of clenched and small, and by the way, this is kind of like your inward position when you're really stressed out, just so you know, when you're really frantic or anxious, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, just take a deep breath, you'll feel better. Wrong, right? Right? Because you go right into your own brick wall, right? So you're in this and you see like you can get a breath, but so in this position of smallness and collapse, there's going to be an optimal breath, right? So you're like knowing that the optimal breath isn't a deep breath here. So now, and when I breathe in this position and I'm in my collapse position, it goes right to the places I overuse in my body, right? It goes away from the places I don't feel. Okay, so now I'm going to start elongating. So I'm going to hit down with my sitting bones and start to lengthen my spine, open my chest. Now, as you notice, when you start to do that, do you notice how presence in more of your body is effortless? Right? You don't have to work for the presence. You don't have to flex a muscle. It's coming from positional changes. So now my breath, when I'm any more elongated with my chest slightly lifted, I don't know, for me, my touchstone is I can feel my breath into my legs better. And it's not because I'm forcing a deeper breath. Good. And then release. So remember, I try to teach from a couple of simple examples, right? Does anyone want to comment? Do you know what I'm even talking about right now? Be honest. Are you raising your hand? Or are you saying yes, Karen?
I'm raising my hand.
Okay. Yep.
This is so profound because I'm very reactive in my nervous system and I
Mhm.
never felt like I had control over it. But what you're saying and what I'm resonating with is that when I'm out of control, I'm usually constricting my body, not even knowing it. But then I've learned
Mhm.
since coming here that, I do have control in that my body can help me get to that place of regulation. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And that's it makes so much, Karen. I swear to God, I didn't pay Karen to say that, right? Because she says she's exactly making my point, is that the effortlessness doesn't just come from quieting down your mind. It's from realizing that your body is profoundly affecting the quality of your breathing.
In fact, I feel like your mind is makes it worse.
Well, I would say the more you do pranayama, especially so pranayama is a very hard thing to practice. It's way harder than asana, in my opinion, right? And you hit this point, and then you go in and out of this point all the time, where you continually start to realize how much your mind does not help your breath, like more than you know. And then yet to fully maximize the potential of your breath, you need your mind to participate, right? So you say, well, then don't become aware of your breathing, for God's sakes, right? If your mind screws it up, right? But that's not true either. But there's that realization, Karen, that your mind interferes with your breath is exactly what makes pranayama so difficult. And you're going to find, at least I have found in my pranayama practice, is that some days, no matter what I do, I can't practice pranayama very well because my mind's too agitated, right? That the impediment is almost always my mind to pranayama, that I know how to get my body in the better positions. And my mind is sometimes unwilling to receive the ease and the effortlessness that can come from my body, right? And it's hard because you learn all these techniques in pranayama where your mind has to be really active. So it gets, oh, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? So you get all these things that are actually making your mind more judgmental, making its relationship to your body more tenuous, not receiving from the body to the mind like is necessary for pranayama, right? So believe it or not, the ceasing in your nervous system, let's call it, it's kind of a stretch, but not really. Let's call it the parasympathetic part of your nervous system. The thing that helps people that live with trauma, loss, and disability. Our minds get over agitated, right? The parasympathetic part of your nervous system, when it calms down, I think you're a little bit closer to the ceasing that's here. And the parasympathetic nervous system is nourishing. So someone that's had a lot of trauma and maybe has PTSD isn't in balance with their parasympathetic nervous system. Um, right? So my camera is off. Bethany just texted me and said, your camera's off. Oh, I had such good facial expressions when I was talking about that. Sorry, I didn't realize I'd knocked that off. Okay. How long has it been off? I have no idea. Okay,
I
so,
thought it was purposeful.
oh God, I wish it was. That was me being an idiot. Whenever that happens, say, Matt, turn your freaking camera on. Right? Oh my, how long has it been off, Bethany?
Not that long.
Oh God. All right, because I'm right. So I know this is a challenging class with a lot of words, right? It's okay. What I'm trying to show you is that there's a whole treasure trove of potential in your breath, right? When you can realize that your body is breathing, right? As opposed to the fact that your mind is controlling your breath, which is paradoxical because pranayama is often wrongly translated, I think, as breath control. If it is breath control, it's control from body to mind and from mind to body. It's not just mind to body. So let's go back to this like more grounded breathing again, right? The transformation of being more expansive. So this breath, right? When I've got more earth in my pose. By the way, see the great thing about laying flat in pranayama, and it's more, I only pretty much practice laying flat in pranayama. I don't do much sitting because I overgrip my diaphragm when I try to sit up and be in Chadahar Bandha. But so here I've got more earth. I got to make sure I stay open by having my spine prepared and my chest slightly lifted. So when I breathe like this, I can use the earth better the grounding better, to make sure my breath permeates, my inhalation and exhalation part of my breath permeates more of my body. So the earth part, when you're lying flat, is guaranteed by lying flat, by the surface contact. Right? So I feel it here when I try to, and then sit up for a second. Now, pranayama is typically in seated pranayama. It's typically got a lot of the chest lift and the drop. This bandha, right? But if you think about the chest lift and the drop, the chin, which I can't sustain for long periods of time without over gripping my diaphragm, which then robs my breath a little bit, the inhalation and exhalation, right? So, but if you think about this movement and this drop, the lock between the lift of the sternum and the drop of the chin is earth, right? It gets it grounded, right? What happens to me when I do it sitting, because I'm paralyzed through my whole abdomen, is that I end up gripping too hard, right? So I get an advantage when I'm doing the seated pranayama to lean forward and lean on my legs. So I don't have to overgrip my diaphragm. Can you follow what I'm saying here? Say no if you're not following. Okay. All right. So this is like a year class here, right? So if I go back over my chair, I get the openness and the easy part of breath, but I lack enough grounding. I'm floating in ether a little bit too much, but I like it. Right here, I come forward and I get more grounded, but I have to recreate the lightness. So do that. So we're going to do pranayama now for the rest of the time, slightly leaning forward onto a table or onto your legs. I would pick legs, but unless you're off balance. You can't breathe well if you're off balance. If you don't have conditions of safety met, I'm trying to do it here on my table because I'm thinking some of you might not be using your legs. It works. It's not bad, right? And it may be because I'm a paraplegic, I just can't find my legs as well, right? So it helps me to have contact. So I'm going to do it. Everything can work. So I'm going to do it more like this, right? And I'm going to make sure that I don't just collapse heavy to find the earth, right? I'm going to get that elongation in my spine, that broadening across my collarbones, and opening of the chest that happens when I'm back here. I'm going to recreate, because I know there's something good about it here, right? I'm going to recreate it here. So I'm leaning forward and I'm opening. Now, here's a trick. When you open your chest, when you're leaning forward, don't do it just with your muscles, do it with your skin. Okay, back to the beginning of the class, right? So here I could just crank it like this and do it like a lifted chest, like I'm doing a yoga pose. No, it's got to be more subtle than that. I've got the elongation. Remember, I hope you're convinced with me that your body's positional awareness will enhance the effortless part of the breath, which will be another method of pranayama. Okay. So all this stuff, man. So I'm leaning forward. I got earth, but I'm not collapsing into earth. I'm feeling the earth and expanding off of it, but in a way that doesn't take too much effort. So I don't want to use too many muscles. I want to like keep my chest lifted. So I might say to you, feel your sitting bones and very gently broaden the space between your shoulder blades. And then lift slightly under your collarbones and drop your shoulder blades down, but do it while you're being more aware of your skin and including the intelligence of your body in. So if this position isn't physically comfortable, find a different position. Because if you're discomforted, your mind won't receive the energy of prana as well. Right? So it's more important that you're not in a bad position than you are, so make your choices. So it helps me, one of the ways it helps me to feel, this is going to sound weird, but in order for me to find my skin, I remember I read a line one time that imagine every skin cell on the inside and outside of your skin. So on the bottom and the top has an eyeball, right? So now I'm going to let the eyes open. I've got the earth. I've got the elongated spine. Lips together, teeth slightly apart. Letting there be space between the skin on my face and my forehead and my cheeks. Keeping myself grounded between the shoulder blades and feeling the space between the shoulders and my ears. As I take an inhalation, gentle inhalation, it's helping me elongate my spine. The ribs and the lungs expand. And as the ribs and the lungs expand, it opens a window and corridor to my legs. The legs are rooted in the earth. On exhalation, things deflate, but I go back to my midline. Inhalation again. Touching everything. Not because my mind makes it happen, because my mind allows it. Exhale and return to the midline. Take a couple of normal breaths. Recovery breaths, because no matter what you over asserted, go back to what's natural. Try it again. Find the earth, but with discipline. Expand your back. Lengthen your back. Lift the chest. Feel the skin between the shoulder blades. Broaden it. Lift under the collarbones. Feel the space between the shoulders and your ears. Allow what's behind you. Exhale all the way. And then take an inhale that touches everything. Don't push your breath. Just let it touch everything. And you exhale back to the midline. And then again, touch everything. without trying. Push nothing. And exhale back to the ceasing, back to the midline, the unchanging calmness. And then inhale, every direction. The outer world comes with you in your expansion on the inhalation. And then exhale, back to the midline. Trust the ceasing. Start the inhalation again. Go at your own pace, though. Choose a recovery breath whenever you need it. Know you need recovery breaths. Couple more focused breaths. Good, and then come up. Go back into your version of Shavasana, right? So let yourself be held up. Don't focus on your breath. It's already going to be lit, right? But don't focus on it. And let the earth or the world hold you up. Of course, soften the organs of perception. And then start to bring yourself back with the movement of your breath. Slightly deeper inhalation. Slightly longer exhalation. Open your eyes and let the light in. Introduce the outer world slowly. Close them again. There's a difference between the inner and outer world, even though they're actually merged. And then open your eyes again. All right. That class had a lot of words, but one of the things that I wanna like, so when it comes to pranayama, this is gonna sound, I don't know, contradictory, but maybe not. At the deepest level, I don't think you have knowledge of pranayama, right? It all comes through experience. You could call that knowledge, right? What I was trying to show you today is maybe, and it might have been overwhelming, right? I don't know. I know it in my path, it has been at times when I realized the total dimension and how big the playing field is of pranayama. Like, so the idea that there's different breaths depending on your position, the whole notion that your body is essential, kind of what Karen was talking about, to why you're not breathing well, right? That realization is an explosion of the dimension of pranayama, right? Um, and it's not just when you see for me, and it's hard to remember for me, but when I all of a sudden have my doors blown off a little bit, and all of a sudden I see the full of a little glimpse into a deeper view, I tend to get overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I'm never going to know this stuff. And that's why I'm telling you, it's not a function of knowledge. It's a function of letting what's true and was always true be actually true, but only in glimpses, right? If I try to, like, when I realize the full implications of when effortful effort becomes effortless, you've encountered the fourth method of pranayama. My mind literally shuts down. I reach a point where I don't know what to do, right? And so those are the types of experiences that you realize that. So when I'm around a very senior Iyengar teacher that's done a lot of pranayama, I often be like, oh my God, there's just so much here. And that's the wrong way of thinking about it, right? It's more like when one of the thoughts that I've been trying to write about is something I've said to you many times before. So you don't breathe pranayama, you don't breathe prana, prana breathes you. And on one level, that's really easy to go, oh yeah, that seems obvious. That's easy, right? Right. And then it's like, wait, I remember I heard it another time saying, I think Gita Iyengar said this. I was in class with her. She said that your lungs are a manifestation of prana. So think of each lung as a giant nostril, right? It's like, what the hell? And all of a sudden it helps. And you're like going, what? How does that work? how do images like this that all of a sudden make you, when you realize that you're not in control of prana, that you're a manifestation of it, and for some reason your mind gets you blocked away from it, right? Because it's too agitated. And the potential of the combination of mental and mind and body breathing with effortless effort, the universe gets really big when that starts to happen. And I can only take it in glimpses, right? Like, honestly, it's overwhelming. If I go, oh my God, I got to do this, I got to practice this while I'm working, doing it, I can't, right? Sometimes I just get a glimpse of it. It's like looking at a great vista and going, holy cow, I'll get to that. I'll get back to that when I'm ready, right? All right. So I hope some of you got something out of this class. And if you have any comments or questions, I can stay around for a while. All right. Otherwise, namaste. Spirit in me bows the spirit in you. And this can be an ongoing discussion, especially like in classes going forward, especially if you all ask me questions in a way that leads us there.